There's one topic in particular that I have had several requests for now, and it's something I'd like to talk about anyways. It's very, very important to know this, and that topic is how to hear God's voice. You know, you have probably met Christians who said, well, God said I need to give this up, or God told me this, and that is such a mystery to even somebody who just became a believer, or, even somebody who's been a believer for 20 years maybe. How exactly do you hear God's voice? And so I've distinguished three steps. I can't promise you how simple they are. They're simple to understand, I think, in a way, but they're not simple to do. For many people, this is a whole lifelong journey to be able to do this. So getting right into it. Step number one, you have to really want to hear God's voice. And what does that mean? At its core, everything about one's relationship with God, one's finding of God, one's speaking with God, it all comes down to desire. Everything in this world comes down to desire, down to the cell phone that is right now recording this, that began as a desire before it was in the physical world. When it comes down to anything, it's desire, willingness, actually. One of the most, if I can put it in one sentence, one thing that was important that I believe came to me from the Lord was one's access to truth depends upon one's willingness to accept it and one's desire to apply it. I'll say that again. One's access to truth, one's knowing of spiritual truth in particular, depends upon one's willingness to accept it. Why would that be hard? Because some truth is extremely hard to accept. It's the scariest thing in the world is truth. And one's desire to apply it, which means I don't want to just know this so I can rattle off some facts for some people, not so I can be the smart guy in the room, but I actually want to change my life with these truths that come to me. There's a very important verse, one of my life verses I call them. I got a little list of verses that speak directly to my life, big time I think. And one of them is Daniel 10:12. And Daniel 10:12 says, "Then he continued, 'Do not be afraid, Daniel. Since the first day that you set your mind to gain understanding and to humble yourself before God, your words were heard, and I have come in response to them.'" That's God speaking, or an angel of God speaking to Daniel, who came to him to show him these visions. Since the first day, which means there was a day before that Daniel wasn't doing this. But since that first day that you did set your mind to gain understanding and to humble yourself, those two are the big important ones. Again, you have to want to understand truly the truth, and not just the truth as you take it. Understanding this takes courage because it's probably going to challenge your preconceived worldview. To know actual truth. Are you willing to forfeit something? Are you willing to sacrifice and put something on the line here to know the truth? And to humble yourself. Before that first day that I sought to gain understanding, like Daniel was written about there, I lived my life very differently. I had my own code. And one of the things that I believed was my greatest strength was I don't need anybody in the world. I don't need nobody, just me. I'm a solo dolo. I can do this for the rest of my life, and I don't need anybody. And I consider that one of my greatest strengths. But really, the source of that was a fear of rejection, and it was actually one of my greatest weaknesses, disguised as one of my greatest strengths. I spent those 2 years in the woods. It was almost like a big, long, prolonged episode of Scooby-Doo, yanking the mask off of all of my greatest strengths, and they were just 45-year-old bums. Underneath the mask. It was just weakness. I had to humble myself first. And so I did not receive the truth until, little did I know, my heart was ready to accept it. And oftentimes, most of the time, we don't even know when that is. God knows when our hearts have softened just enough for him to poke us with a revelation of a real truth. And then we're at the crossroads. Then we have to make a decision whether we're going to accept it or not. And then, even more importantly, apply it. Another verse that is really important to that, and I've got a list of these verses I'll put up on the screen, because it's verses that make it very clear that it's God who closes our minds and opens our minds when it's our hearts that decide that. It's not about being smart, it's about being willing, and being willing is a heart matter, not a mind matter. And so Ephesians 4:18 says, "They are darkened in their understanding and separated from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them due to the hardening of their hearts." So their understanding is darkened. Why is that? Because they're ignorant. And why is that? Because their heart is hard. Because they don't want to know, really. They want to live their life the way they want to live their life. They want to live their life pridefully, so I'm going to let them. It's all about free will. Free will is a willing heart. A hard heart is a stiff neck. I'll do what I want to do. I like my code. I don't need anybody. I'm too strong for the world. That's a hard heart. You're not willing to hear it. Okay, so step one. I have another one, Job 17:4. You have closed their minds to understanding, meaning God closed their minds. So you ever look up and wonder how people can possibly believe what they believe, and they're like so far off, everybody knows they're delusional. It's because they want to be delusional. Step two. After you become truly willing, that's the big one, really. That's the big one. God kind of takes your hand from here. But once your heart is really willing to forfeit what you think you know and to humble yourself and to apply the truth that comes to you after that moment, then you have to start paying very close attention to your desires. Not yet your thoughts. That it's a step that comes a little later when you can start actually having conversations. But before that, you have to start looking inward and looking deeply at your own desires. That's a very important step too, is because we're waiting to hear a voice in our head, but the voice is in our heart when we first want to hear God. He speaks to us, prompting us with desires, and so does another force, evil. So our hearts are battlefields between good and evil, and those voices that speak back and forth. You know, you say you want to steal something, suddenly there's two voices in you. Don't steal it, steal it. No. And you're like, what am I going to do? Those are desires that are speaking back and forth to one another, not conscious thoughts. Maybe they're bubbling up as like kind of semi-conscious thoughts, but really it's in the heart. It's a desire thing. So start paying very close attention to what I write. Your wants, your longings, your desires, your temptations, your feelings. These emotions are not just things that you can see on a computer screen. They're not just chemicals running through your body. The chemicals that are moving through your body were sparked by something before that. And so that's what we see in the physical world, but these emotions are being enacted upon us by higher forces. Think about it this way. Where do feelings, where do temptations and desires come from? I've asked this in a philosophy class, and somebody scoffed and said, your brain. And I said, really? So then, let me give you an example. Say you've been dating a girl for a while, and you guys are really into each other, and you're out in public, sitting at a bench at a coffee shop, and some couple guys come out, and they're just kind of cracking jokes, and then they crack a joke over here, and your girlfriend laughs a little too hard, and maybe the guy's kind of attractive, and something in you just was like, hey, I don't like this. A little bit of jealousy. Your brain knows that there's nothing to be worried about, that this is just a chance encounter. But something just entered your heart like, I don't like this, a little bit of jealousy. Can you turn that off whenever you want right now? Can you just, like a switch, use your brain, if that's where it's coming from? You know, if these desires are coming from your brain, and your brain is conscious, should your brain not be able to just flip it off when they're at will? Which doesn't work that way. As a matter of fact, you just got to sit it out. You get to decide whether you act upon it or not. You get to decide what you do about it, but you don't get to decide whether you have it. These are all evil temptations, by the way. You know, when you're tempted, if you're like me, you've struggled with substance addiction. And so when you're trying to leave one of those behind, when you're trying to break your addiction on something, but you really want that cigarette, or you really want that, in my case it was meth, you don't just get to turn that temptation off. You wish you could. But this is, and that to me is evidence that this is coming from somewhere else onto me, and I'm like pinned up against the wall and I gotta wait it out or act on it. And so once you start paying very close to those desires and temptations, you'll start to realize actually that there are two different forces that speak back and forth to one another. And they're not actually speaking to one another, they're speaking to you. It's like you're pinned in the middle of this conversation that's trying to convince you one way or another. And there's one voice that screams, and there's one voice that condemns, and there's one voice that's very angry. And then there's the other voice that, if you do ignore the voice and you do steal something, that voice is a little quieter. It just kind of lets you do it. It just kind of pokes you like, hey, maybe that's not a good idea. But if you say, shut up, then that voice would be like, okay. And so the Spirit himself, the Holy Spirit, testifies with our spirit that we are God's children. So that's what that's saying, is that the Spirit of God, the Holy Spirit, speaks directly to our spirit, which is also our heart, through the form of desire. And I'll get into the Trinity someday. Little tidbit here, we are also a Trinity. We are made in God's image, so we are also a three-part being. And so the heart/spirit is one of those parts. I'll make a video about that too. The third step. So let me do it. Step one, you really got to want to know the truth. Humble yourself, willing to lose something. Step two, pay close attention to your desires now. Start figuring out these voices. Start to get better at hearing them. Know where to look is your heart, their desires. Now step three, you start questioning those desires. You start talking back to them. That voice says, go ahead and steal that bubble gum. Nobody's going to know, and it's, $1.20. No big deal. This is a giant corporation. Just steal it. You want it? No problemo. Question that. Why? Why is my desire more important than this right here? Why do I want the gum to, maybe it tastes good, but like, is there anything more important than this pleasure right now? Like, is this theft to me? Why is this voice over here telling me not to? And if you do things like that, you'll realize that there's guilt afterwards. Like, oh gosh, I didn't want to steal that. The gum's actually not worth it in the end. Or say that guy comes out of that coffee shop and your girl laughs a little too hard at his joke, and then you make this big scene. Why? Why did you feel jealous? And if you start pulling the string of whys, maybe you'll find that actually you're a little insecure, and it actually wasn't your girlfriend's fault, it wasn't the guy's fault, it wasn't anybody's fault but your own. And actually that insecurity in you wish wasn't there anyways. So not only is that your fault, but it's actually kind of a call to become better in yourself. And you don't need to change these two people that had nothing to do with the fact that you made a scene because you're insecure. And you start questioning these desires. Like a good example for me is when I first found the Lord a little over 2 years ago. I was still enrolled in psychology course here at the college. And I was having major issues with what I was being taught, or they were attempted to teach me in psychology. I have big issues with what I believe is the over-medication of people, in the extreme form children, and that's rampant. And so I had to go through a real journey with that. And when I found the Lord, I was like, the only reason I came to college is because I came out of the woods and I wanted to help people with the things that I had learned kind of on my own in my own soul searching. I don't feel like I could be effective in this field. And now I just found the truth. And so I was starting to spend 4 and then 6 and then 8 and then 12 hours a day in the Bible, learning the real truth, really how to help people, what people really need, the water for the real fish ashore, not this putting on the Band-Aid and drugging people until they're too numb to be as sad as they, it's just like just playing this peeing in the wind game with this focusing on the brain when it comes from the heart, slapping a Band-Aid on the mind, and even worse, just drugging people. I started finding the real truth. So suddenly I was at the crossroads. I was like, okay, well, I have to close this Bible, which I know is the truth, to go to a class and I don't agree with. And so I was like trying to talk to the Lord. I was praying all the time. I was like, Lord, what do I do here? Do you want me to continue in psychology, knowing the truth, and then once I become a therapist, try to insert this message of Christ and love into the field somehow? Is that what you want me to do? Or is this just wasting my time here? And I spent all summer unsure, right on the fence. Didn't feel like I was getting much of an answer back. And finally I realized, you want me to choose. And so what I did was I turned inwards and I started questioning those desires. Okay, I put my foot down on my own spirit one day in my van and I asked myself, why do you want to stay in school? And when I really got down to it, I found just a tiny little kernel of fear that maybe if I drop out of college right now, I'll never be able to help anybody. Maybe I'll just fade away and that'll be that. And then the other voice right in that moment said, do you think the institutions of man are in control in this world? You're going to help. I asked you to choose because you're going to help people no matter what you choose to do here. It's going to happen. Don't put your trust in these man-made institutions. That's not essentially what's actually going to get anything done anyways. So I found fear. That was the why of that feeling. That was that why of the desire to stay into school. God doesn't speak to us through fear. So who was it trying to keep me in school? Maybe keep me distracted from this real book. Keep me in that classroom when I should be in that Bible. By the way, I'm not saying this is everybody's path, but it took me a long time to figure this one out for myself. And so I started finding out. I'm just like, okay, that's the why of that voice. I get it. So I pulled up my laptop, dropped out all my classes, put my laptop in my backpack, pulled the Bible back to me, and I was like, thank you, Lord. But guess what he doesn't also speak like? If you pull at the string of whys on a desire and you find pride, or vanity, or greed, or fear, selfishness, anger, wrath, lust, if you find any of these things, once you start paying a close enough attention to your desires and then you start questioning them by pulling the string of whys, why do you feel this? It'll give you an answer. Maybe there's another why behind that. Ask it. Again, with a heart ready to sacrifice whatever you need to get this answer. You'll start to find that the core of all these desires are just one of a few things. And the only one you're really supposed to listen to is the one that's speaking in love, faith, forgiveness, gentleness, self-control, all of these things. Not selfish ambition, which there might have been a kernel of that in my staying with school too. Well, I kind of had an idea of being a therapist, and I, maybe I kind of liked that idea myself. That wasn't from faith. It wasn't trusting God. And Paul wrote, and it's one of the truest things ever written, that anything done outside of faith is sin, outside of trust in Him, not the world. And so, work on your heart. Humility is not, there is second to none, humility. Figure out what you need to lose in your life and in your heart to become more humble and ready to accept the truth. And then start asking truthfully. Become willing. 2, pay close attention to your desires. And 3, start questioning those desires.